Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin, and this is episode 476. I am not joined today by my co-host Prez, who is probably off somewhere doing the work that real citizens should be doing and trying to save the world. But we're not doing that. We're going to be here to try to maybe save the Knicks. I don't know if we're going to save the Knicks. I don't think the Knicks need saving. I think the Knicks need a lot of things that are well within their grasp if they choose to use them. But to discuss all that, I'm joined by Geoffrey Rasmussen. You may know him as at Frank Barrett 119 on Twitter. He's the co-founder of the Hot Hand Theory. He also does plenty of work for the Strickland, post games, threads, film, random articles that he has planned and will drop at various points. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Excited to. It's been too long, Shwin. We've spoken a couple times this season. Most of the conversations have been probably more positive than this one's going to be, but I still think, I want to lead off instead of end with the note that, I think we should probably try to remind the problems we're going to discuss here. These are good problems to have. The Knicks are generally in a good spot. They're in the top third of the league. So hopefully when people listen to this, that framing can be underlying, like Shwin and I in the general macro of the Knicks are positive, and it's a good time to be a Knicks fan, even if, it's also simultaneously a frustrating time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is the life cycle that occurs for a lot of good teams. I have experienced this very much. Not just with the Knicks. And actually, to be quite honest with you, this is the first year where I've really felt this with the Knicks. It's been kind of like a general upward trajectory over the last 5 seasons now, I guess, including this as the 5th season. Obviously, the 2021-22 season sucked, but it at least gave us, things that ended up reaping rewards down the road. And yeah, whatever. Look, we're going to talk about that. And yeah, I was going to say, this is something I'm experiencing much more keenly with the Bills, where I'm like, can Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and general satanic nature of the Kansas City Chiefs go away forever? Apparently not. But we're not here to talk about the Bills. We will talk about the Knicks. Before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. For the first being that the Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are not done so already, please subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles. You name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Ivy's Bozos podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Ladder, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Home, my solo pod, I rant, that makes even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in business, and you get access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Mechkos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier that's come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on the pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform. Your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. For every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline is you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. But just completely unsolicited college betting advice, and I'm going to be very, very transparent about this. I have watched maybe like 27 minutes of college basketball in its entirety this season. But I feel very confident about two things. Bet on UConn against the spread in the NCAA tournament. Bet against Matt Painter and his Purdue Boilermakers against the spread in every game in the NCAA tournament for as long as you can. Those are my two pieces of advice to any first-time bettors. Also, if you're a first-time bettor, maybe don't bet on the NCAA tournament as your first thing to do. Okay. We're not talking about that anymore. We're going to talk about the Knicks. The Knicks lost last night in a very stupid, dumb game against the Spurs where they lost 120-105. Sandro Mamu Kalashvili, who I believe played at Hofstra, he went 7 of 7 from 3. In this game, he went 4 of 4 in the fourth quarter. Very, very annoying. And yes, look, I think it's fine to be like, yeah, it's a little bit random. It's bad luck, sure. He's not a terrible 3-point shooter. We've had this type of thing happen too often. And I don't want to get tied down into the micro because I want to talk about more of the broad stuff that I think is bubbling over now as the season is kind of just it's the NBA season is so fucking long, and honestly, it just feels a little bit like I'm still not at the point where I'm like the Knicks are locked in at the 3 seed. I think they should get across the line as a 3 seed, as long as they don't have too many more absolutely ridiculously stupid games like they did last night. We'll see if they are able to clear that very, very high bar. But I think what is very, very frustrating is there are 2 or 3 things I want to touch upon. The first being that what you really want to see, I think, over the course of a season is layers get added on and things that maybe were initially a weakness, maybe they don't become a strength, but you find ways to mitigate it, to do the best you can. And that's not to say that you can overcome any and all roster personnel issues simply with good coaching and creative coaching. No, like we know that there are great coaches. I mean, this is the reality of any sport. The greatest coach in the world can do all of the right things and his team can still be bad. But you want to see the coach do the right things. You want to see the coach learn from things that are not working, avoid those things, find ways to improve them, etc. We are now at game 68. We played 68 games so far this season. The Knicks have 14 games left. We have a significant sample size now that tells us Precious Achiuwa at the 4, even with Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5, is on a particularly great lineup. And if you include the minutes that they play with Josh Hart at the 3, it becomes even less good because they have real spacing issues with Precious and Hart on the floor together. We are continuing to get these minutes, and the argument that I'm sure many have made is, well, with Brunson out, this is not avoidable. I don't think that's true. And certainly, if I did think it was true, and if that was the way I was going to operate as the coach, I would find a way to make sure that I at least put the best amount of spacing I can possibly have if I'm going to use Precious Achiuwa at the 4. That does not seem to be under much consideration for Tom Thibodeau at the moment. Things like that are frustrating. I think there are real things like this across the roster. And with Brunson out, what we have seen now is Deuce McBride is now the starting point guard. But we also know that when Brunson is healthy, Deuce never plays point guard. He plays most of his minutes next to a point guard, such as Jalen Brunson or Cam Payne. With Brunson out, okay, fine. Deuce has to play some point. I'm fine with that. I don't know why we're not now allowed to see him and Payne ever play together that Brunson is out. I find that very weird. I especially find it weird for a coach who we know previously, when guys are injured, is not hesitant to cut his rotation down rather than find a way to add a 9th player to it. For some reason, he's not doing that right now. He's extending it to have Precious on the floor. Again, don't particularly agree with it, but it is what it is. It's very frustrating. Anyway, I'm rambling about a very small thing. This is my main macro takeaway from what we've seen so far this season. This is something me and you actually disagreed on. I said before the season, and I have maintained it throughout the season, I did not think the Knicks were legitimate contenders this year. As far as I just did not see a world where this version of the Knicks, with the personnel they have available to them, let's say everybody's at full health, I do not think they are capable of beating Boston in 7 games. I suspect that they're not capable of beating Cleveland in 7 games, although I still maintain that there's something about that matchup I kind of like. And even though the metrics would tell you that Cleveland is like an all-time great team, I just still don't fully buy into it. That is not to say they're not better than the Knicks, but like I can see a world where the Knicks defeat Cleveland in 7 games. I don't see that world for them to beat Boston in 7 games. Now, leaving that aside, even if I came into the season saying, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I do not think the Knicks can actually win a championship this year. but that's okay. I think they made these moves to acquire said players so that they have a window, and then within that window, they will have time to add the necessary pieces, personnel, whatever, to construct a roster that I do believe is title worthy. Okay, so that's where I came in entering the season. That does not mean that every that does not mean that as long as we get to the second round, well, okay, well, how can you be mad? The Knicks they're as good as you said they were, right? They got to the second round. They lose to a Boston. They lose to a Cleveland. They're the third seed. They're behind Boston or Cleveland. Like, they're doing what you said they were. Yes, they are. But they are not doing it in a way that optimizes their current roster, and I don't think pushes their ceiling as high as it could go, even if I don't think that ceiling is a championship team this year. And it raises major concerns for me as far as, even if we get the additional wing that I think the Knicks could use, maybe that's Dadier in a year's time or whatever it is, the additional wing the Knicks could use, the certainty of center play they could use, right? Is that Mitchell Robinson finding the cure to all injuries and remaining healthy for the rest of his career, or is that getting some other really good center in his place? Getting maybe another more reliable creator, although I think campaign has actually done really well for the Knicks. Even if I get those pieces, the inability of Tibbs to maximize and optimize the pieces he currently has at his disposal, especially when, to me, those decisions are very straightforward, like forgetting the debate over should Josh Hart not start. It's still very obvious that Deuce McBride should play more and be mixed and matched into different lineups in general than we have seen. It is obvious to me that playing Precious Achiuwa at the 4 is not productive. It is obvious to me that if you trade for Karl-Anthony Towns, part of the reason you do that is to have the option to play 5 out. If you never play him in 5 out lineups, which is basically what the Knicks do, Josh Hart has had a great individual season, but he simply is not defended as a shooter. And so, yes, you can tell me that they are playing 5 out just because they have 3 wings and a guard next to Karl-Anthony Towns, but that's not really 5 out. They're not really getting 5 out spacing. So when I see all of these little things that speak to a coach who is more committed or stubborn, let's just say, to what he thinks should work or what needs to work or whatnot, it's concerning. And it's concerning because this is the type of stuff that we have seen happen in previous seasons. And at this point, this is our 5th year with Tibbs. Okay, we don't need to constantly debate whether Tibbs has been good for the Knicks. He's been a good coach for the Knicks. But we know he hasn't been perfect. And we know that there are decisions he's made in the past, as well as this season, that are that fall in under the same umbrella of don't quite get why this is happening constantly, don't quite get why this isn't happening more. And it all just it just leads to these very frustrating roundabout arguments of like the same shit over and over, and you're changing pieces and different players, but it's the same arguments I'm having about Josh Hart. I don't particularly think that Sample is encouraging for him in this starting lineup, but there's maybe a way to use him that's beneficial for the team. These are arguments that we've had about players in the past. Definitely not to the same extent. So I want to be very clear. I'm not comparing this Josh Hart to this player. Very similar to the idea of like Elfrid Payton sucks. Why is he starting for an entire fucking season when we know he sucks? Like Josh Hart very clearly does not suck, but he also is not optimizing that lineup. And that's not just him, by the way. Like that lineup, the better way to phrase it is that lineup is not being optimized as a collective group. Okay. And this has been it's the most played lineup in the NBA by like, I'm sure you know the numbers better than me, but it's probably by like 600 minutes or something at this point. Again, just to tie this up as neatly as I can, because I've had so many fucking takes going through my head going through this year. I think we're seeing concerning signs, again, from Tibbs in terms of understanding or at least accepting what his best lineups and best rotations should look like with and without injuries. And then, on top of that, I think that there's a general complacency that has slipped into this team's mindset and approach to games. And I don't know what that is. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but it shouldn't look like we should not come out in games like against Miami and against San Antonio and immediately fall behind and play from behind from the jump. Of course, against Miami, they're able to turn the ship around. Not so much last night, but it should not be this struggle constantly. And it shouldn't look like you're coming out and playing a team irrespective of their strengths. And I thought I had seen improvement of that during some of the West Coast trip, but these last two games, in particular last night, was highly discouraging in terms of attention to detail and opponent specificity of game plan. To come out and just play drop against Chris Paul is fucking insane. Like there's no other way for me to put it other than that. We see them at the start of games constantly be confused about who has who defensively, what their assignments are defensively. I suspect, I have theorized previously that again, my hypothesis is that we know that the Knicks are not practicing very much. This has been reported by beat writers. This has been talked about by Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and confirmed by Tibbs on their podcast. I think that their preparation, their level of preparation has fallen off. And I think that is a consequence of how they are trying to make up for the fact that Tibbs is playing them a certain amount of minutes. And so they have to cheat rest where they can get it. How do we get more rest? We don't practice. That's what I think. And that's fine. If the argument is that leads, that is actually going to, these players are going to be healthy and they've played more and their record this year in terms of injury health has been good. So maybe there's some method to that madness. But if the trade-off is stuff we see like this, and it might not matter against the Heat. It might not matter against the Spurs on most days. It might not matter tonight against the Charlotte Hornets. But you know when it does matter? When you play a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers and you approach it the same way. When you play a team like the Boston Celtics and you approach it the same way. When you come out on national TV against Oklahoma City and approach it the same way. So I just rambled on for a while. Those are my broad thoughts. Those are my main concerns about this team. I don't really care to dive into the specifics of the Spurs game unless you want to, but take that wherever you want to take it, Jeff.
Yeah, it's honestly super impressive. I sit here and wonder how you're able to put all these thoughts together. And then it's like, oh, well, this is episode 476. This is how you get to this many episodes. Like your recall, and it astonishes me. It always is impressive when I watch you on post games, when I listen to your shows. It's just, I need a beat. I need some time to think about each topic. So I'm going to do my best here to just sort of not bounce around, but just give concise thoughts on, because you gave me a lot of good things to think about. Regarding the Precious Hart thing, it's just like, it is what it is, like the Hart and Precious get crushed when they play together in non-garbage time. They've played 511 minutes and they're losing by almost 4 points per 100 possessions. Interestingly enough, when neither one is on the court, we're actually building a pretty decent sample. It's almost 300 minutes. And the Knicks are outscoring the opponents by 17 points per 100 possessions of non-garbage time. So like pretty tipped scales there. But I think, just the general point you made about rotations, this is the thing that we've seen with Tom Thibodeau throughout his career with the Knicks. This is the tipping point, I would say, or the inflection point. And I don't think bringing up Elfrid Payton is unfair or an insult to Josh Hart, not because I think they're similar as players, but because I think that the root of the issue is the same. So even if Josh Hart is miles better than Elfrid Payton was, it's still about a commitment and a dedication to a lineup that frankly hasn't earned it. And, you brought up the sample at this point, the starting lineup, even with Jalen Brunson missing 5 or 6 games now, the starting lineup with Jalen Brunson has played almost double the minutes of any other lineup in the entire NBA. Like that's ludicrous. And then you also brought up, I don't think this is a championship season. And I think a lot of people share your sentiment and they think, oh, well, the bench needs to improve. They've got to, keep filling out the roster. Maybe that's right. That could be right. I don't think it is, but it could be right. I'm open to the possibility. If that's the case, doing it this way is even worse. This is the year to try more things, not fewer things. If this is year 0, you throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. You don't throw one thing that's not working and say, well, it was the best we had. I know it was the best we had, even though I didn't try anything else. That doesn't make any sense.
Just to build on that point real quick, like if we're gonna say this is year 0, which like I get people's framing of that, I don't agree with it, even though I guess we disagree on what the ceiling of this team potentially is. But like to me, it's, if you want to call it year 0, year 1, whatever, it doesn't really matter. If you're treating this as a year where, well, we're not quite a championship team, but we're going to figure things out and then we'll have a better idea of how to fill out the roster. Okay, so it's a fact-finding mission this season. Find the facts. Find them. Like, search. Try different things. I think Mark Daignault said something the other day about how, like, his job as a coach is to, I don't remember the exact terminology.
It was a great quote. He said it would be irresponsible of him to not look for all the answers, even if something is counterintuitive to him. Because he was specifically asked about trying Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein at playing together. And he clearly prefers to play small, to leverage shooting and spacing. And they were like, why are you going to this double big lineup if the identity of your team is spacing and quick and fast defense on the back end and all that stuff? And he said it would be irresponsible for me to just not try something just because it's counterintuitive to me. These are 2 of my best players. I have to see what they give me together. That's like, that is the antithesis to what we've seen for 5 seasons. If something is counterintuitive to Tom Thibodeau, and we see it play out all the time on the court. Like, he'll try a 5-out lineup for a possession. And if it doesn't go well, he's like, well, that's proof it didn't work. We got to go back to Josh. Like that, just like that. And
I think like there's a weird connection here, but like, look, I think Josh Hart is, I forgot who said this. Somebody in our Discord said this, but like, he is like a player I love, but pisses me off all the time. And like, but I think a lot of that is tied into the way and the positions he's being put into, and the way he's being used in the positions he's being put into. And like, it's not all of Josh's issues are not on Tibbs. I want to be very clear about that. Like, Tibbs wants him to shoot fucking threes, right? Like, I'm sure he tells him to shoot threes. If Josh is like pump faking out there constantly, then that's on Josh. But you know what's not on Josh? When that's happening, Tibbs has to be able to be like, you are not LeBron James. You are not Steph Curry. You are not Jalen Brunson. Like, you are not this level of player where when you don't have it, I'm just like, I don't care, man. Like, I've seen this guy do, and I get it. Josh is like stepped up in moments and whatever, but like, you've got to be able to look at the guy, understand what he is. Like, he's getting paid what? I think he got a 4-year, $81 million extension. So he's getting paid like $20 million a year. That is the money of a solid starter, which is about the level of player he is, which is good. That's good. But you know what you can do with the solid starter? Hey, man, you just don't have it tonight. Like, we're going to try something else.
It's not your night.
Yeah, it's not your night. And like, for whatever reason with Josh Hart, he can't do it. And I think there are 2 things this always comes back to at Tibbs. The 2 biases that all of the stuff we're talking about, his unwillingness to mix and match, his unwillingness to play small, to play 5-out, whatever. He has a very, very strong bias of, I need X amount of size on the floor. So even if if I play 2 guards together, okay, I'm going to play 2 guards together, but I got to get that size back somewhere else in the lineup. Somewhere else in the lineup, I got to get the size back. And not only do I have to get the size back, I also have to get the rebounding back, which is why Josh Hart for him is a guy he cannot quit, because Josh Hart is a great rebounder. He's going to get the rebounds, he's going to crash the glass, and he's going to do fantastic things as a rebounder. But he values that so much that he can't accept, or at least attempt to kind of, to the point that Daignault made, is think of it like, hey, let me just try this counterintuitive thing to me, which is, right, very basic. It's a very basic example, and I want to be clear. This is not the only example, but I just want to use this because it's the one that I think all Knicks fans have talked about and theorized about. You guys over at How to Hanther, you and XJ have definitely been on this train of thought since before the season started. Oh my God, Karl Anthony Towns is a good rebounder. McCall's not a particularly good rebounder. Brunson's not a particularly good rebounder. OG waxes and wanes on the glass. Like, the most important thing to make this lineup work is having a semblance of another strong rebounder, and Josh Hart gives me that. Okay, that's fair. I think Josh Hart does add something to that lineup in terms of rebounding that helps you. But that trade-off that you make there is he does not space the floor effectively.